All right, welcome. Good evening, everyone. My name's Christopher Nelson. I am the publisher and editor at Linden Press. I want to thank you all for being here to celebrate the publication of At the Edge, Selected Political Poems of Marina Tsvetaeva, translated by Margaree Little. Linden Press is an independent publisher of poetry books and broadsides and the journal Under a Warm Green Linden. Based in Grinnell, Iowa, we're a nonprofit organization dedicated to fostering excellent literature and supporting reforestation. With your help, we have planted 900 trees. We publish books in our Wishing Jewel series for poetic innovation, our Stephen Mitchell series for excellence in translation, of which At the Edge is part, our Essential Voices anthology series, which addresses through poetry misunderstandings and misrepresentations in the broader culture, and our chapbook series. I invite you to visit our catalog at Linden Press to see our titles. Each purchase supports our green mission. And for tonight and tomorrow, all orders are discounted for audience members. You can simply enter the word reading at the final step during checkout. That's R-E-A-D-I-N-G, reading. I'll put the link in the chat in just a bit. And for the poets and translators in the audience, a reminder that we are currently accepting book-length manuscripts through November 30th. You can visit our submission page for more information about those opportunities. And following tonight's reading, Margaree has agreed to answer questions and have a conversation, so please stay if you're able. And I want to thank you again for being here. To begin my introduction of tonight's poet and translator, I'm going to read the first page of Margaree's insightful commentary that opens At the Edge. Marina Tsvetaeva was one of the foremost Russian poets of the 20th century. Born in 1892 to a family of wealth, she lived most of her life in poverty and exile following the Russian Revolution of 1917 and the Moscow famine. Despite isolation, political disaster, and personal tragedy, she wrote extensively throughout her lifetime. Tsvetaeva's political poems, a crucial part of her sensibility and life's work, have largely been neglected in English language translation. Many translators have emphasized instead poems she wrote about her tumultuous personal and romantic relationships, an emphasis that suggests a gendered reading of the poet as an extreme personality rather than as a poet responding to the extremity of her time. It was through Tsvetaeva's poems about her romantic relationships and through the letters she exchanged with Rainer Maria Rilke and Boris Pasternak that I too first became acquainted with her work. As I read further, I felt something was missing when her political poems appeared in selected English language collections. They did so only fragmentarily and often in versions that seemed at once hyperbolic and muted. In fact, as I gradually became aware, Tsvetaeva was deeply attuned to the political circumstances in which she lived, and she wrote extensively and incisively about them. To erase this part of the poet and her work is to domesticate and exotify her for a Western audience. She becomes a doomed romantic figure, the exotic other, the hysterical woman, all the familiar stereotypes of our imaginations as we ignore her reality. At the Edge, Selected Political Poems seeks to correct this misreading and fill a gap in our understanding of her poetry by bringing together a selection of political poems, many of them never before translated into English, at a moment in our own culture when they are acutely relevant. End quote. As the editor of the Stephen Mitchell translation series, I was drawn to so much in these poems. the lyricism, the compressed lines, the crystalline imagery. I'm haunted by this scene, the pillaging of the prince's wine warehouse, precious ditches of wine that the moon dances in, bloody. I was drawn to the drama of the poems, the drama of social unrest and war. Tsvetaeva's brilliance, I believe, was not only to document and tell, but to do so without romanticizing and without false hopes. There's a candor to the work that gives it timeless value. And it is Margaree Little's expertise, her nuanced finesse with the two languages, that unlocks the poems so that we can enter, so that we can be haunted, and we can sing with Tsvetaeva. We are indebted to her for the years of work that made these poems available to us. At a time of insurgent fascism, Tsvetaeva reminds us that, quote, as long as there is spit in our mouths, the whole country is armed. Margaree Little's translations from the Russian of Tsvetaeva and Mandelstam have appeared in American Poetry Review, Asymptote, the Brooklyn Rail, and the Michigan Quarterly Review. Her first poetry collection, Rest, from Four Way Books, won the Balcones Poetry Prize and the Audre Lorde Award. She's the recipient of fellowships and awards from the Rona Jaffe Foundation, the Kenyon Review, Breadloaf, Camargo Foundation, the Arizona Commission on the Arts, and others. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Margaree Little.
I'm sorry, is it work? Can you hear me now? Okay. Sorry about that. Thank you so much, Christopher, for that beautiful and generous introduction. And thank you so much to Linden Press. I'm so lucky and grateful to be with this beautiful press, and to have Christopher as an editor who did such meticulous work with so much care throughout this whole process to create a book, this beautiful book that I couldn't have imagined. In case you haven't seen the cover, Christopher also created this beautiful book cover. Um, thank you. Um, and thank you all so much for being here. There are so many friends from afar and from here. Um, Dr. Lucy, thank you for coming. Yulia, Tatiana, Stephanie, Spencer, Cecile, Michael, um, Eleanor, Cheney, um, Spencer. I can't remember if I said your name already. Thank you so much, and others too, for being here, um, and taking the time to listen. So I'm going to read from the collection. The poems in the book span a period of time from 1915 to 1939. And the book is divided into sections. I will pause before I read a group of poems to provide some context, some historical and personal context to the poems. Um, and I also wanted to mention that many of the poems are untitled. So in those instances, I will simply pause before reading the poem. So I'm going to begin with four early poems from that begin in 1915 within the context of the First World War. I know the truth. All the old truths are gone. People don't need to fight people on earth. Look, it's evening. Look, it soon will be night. What are poets, lovers, generals about. The wind is already drifting, the earth already in dew. Soon a blizzard will freeze in the starry sky, and soon we will all fall asleep under the earth, who on earth never let each other sleep. White sun and low, low clouds. Along vegetable gardens, behind a white wall, a churchyard. And on the gravel, a row of straw scarecrows, under the crossbeams, at human height. And leaning over the fence posts, I see roads, trees, scattered soldiers. An old woman at the gate chews and chews a hunk of black bread sprinkled with salt. How have these gray huts angered you, Lord? And for what so many people shot in the chest? A train passed and soldiers howled, and howled, howled down the retreating track. No, to die. Better never to have been born than this plaintive, pitiful convict's howl about dark-browed beauties. Oh, and how soldiers sing these days. Oh, Lord my God. Not my grief, not my concern, how the sowing rises. That's not what I want. It's someone great, both an angel and a lion. In the eyes of the young, I guard languor, blackness, and heat. So from heart to heart, from house to house, I'm starting a fire. Curls are disheveled, a collar is torn, emptiness, flight. The clouds float, and the burning city is floating under me. At night, all the rooms are black. Every voice is dark. At night, all the beauties of this earthly country are equally, innocently unfaithful. And at night, the beauties and the thieves lead each other talking. You'll walk past your own house, and your house is not the same at night. And your neighbor is strangely different, and behind each back is a knife. And the huge black trees stagger in powerless anger. Oh, and the underground bed is narrow. At night, in darkness at night. Oh, I'm afraid that I'm going to get up and whisper and kiss on the lips. Pray for me, dear children, at the first hour and the third hour of night. The next group of poems that I will be reading are from Tsvetaeva's long cycle called The Swan's Encampment, which she wrote between 1917 and 1921 during the Civil War and the Moscow famine. A bit of personal context for these poems as well. Tsvetaeva's husband, Sergei Efron, fought with the White Army during the Civil War, and she was separated. She and their daughters were separated from him for the duration of the war, and they lived in Moscow during the time of the famine. Her younger daughter actually died during the famine. Over the church, blue clouds, the scream of a raven. And they pass, the colors of ash and sand, revolutionary troops. Oh, my grief, you are lordly, you are royal. They don't have faces and they don't have names. They have no songs. You got lost, Kremlin's ringing. in this windy forest of flags. Pray, Moscow, lie down, Moscow, for eternal sleep. Scarcely light, they hurry, run together, the pack of mice at the ringing of the bells, Moscow underground. They leave their burrows, old women, thieves, conducting conversations. Candles burn, the spirit descends on small children, on crazy old women. In the half-light, grudgingly somehow, a clerk mutters. From black rags, they crawl out into God's light. Pennies poor, pennies careful, got with sweat and blood, the widow's pennies. For that rainy day, yes, for the sake of the soul, postponed. So at dawn, they light candles, take out communion bread, old women, thieves. For the belly, the health of God's servant, Nicholas. So at dawn, his dark feast is celebrated underground. For this next poem, I would like to just include a clarification. The word liar in this poem is Lyre, not Liar. We must be brave enough to admit, liar. We gravitated toward the great things of the world, to mass, banners, churches, kings, to bards, heroes, eagles, and elders. So having sworn allegiance to kingdoms, don't trust tents in the winds. You know the Tsar, don't favor the houndsman. Loyalty like an anchor held us. Loyalty in greatness, guilt, disaster. Loyalty to the great faulty crown. So having sworn allegiance to the Khan, don't swear allegiance to his horde. We caught the windy century, liar. The wind has torn our uniforms to shreds, fluttering in the last flap of the tent. New crowds, different flags. But we stay loyal to our oath, for bad leaders are winds. If the soul was born with wings, what are mansions to her and what are huts? What is Genghis Khan to her and what to her the horde? I have two enemies in this world, two twins inextricably fused. The hunger of the starving and the satiety of the glutton. I trust this book to the wind and to the oncoming cranes. A long time ago, to shout over separation, I broke my voice. I throw this book like a bottle into waves, into the whirlwind of wars. Let it wander like a candle on a feast day, passed from hand to hand. O wind, wind, my faithful witness, bring it to my dear ones, on the path I take nightly in my dreams, from north to south. The last poem I'm going to read from this section has a subtitle, which is The Capture of the Crimea. And I dream terrible dreams, a red cart. Behind it, bent, the sons of my country walk. Having raised their golden-haired child, the mothers scream. In front of the church, under the banner, waving his purple fingerless hand, a cripple screams with a scarlet rag. a legless crutch burns, and red to the sky, dust. Rusty wheels creak. The steed is dancing, furious. At all the windows, flags are seething. One is shut. So I'm going to read a group now of poems written between 1919 and 1934. And this is a period of time that spans Tsvetaeva's movement into exile. She went into exile in 1922, first in Czechoslovakia, where she reunited with her husband. And then their family moved to Paris in 1925. The first poem is called To Moscow. Inheritance to the orphanage, I will not. Great your corpulence, I renounce. As I look at my neighbors in the distance, I renounce. As I tread on your cobblestones, I renounce. As in the 17th year, righteous in white, I stood smiling under fire. As in the 18th year, with what? A trace of rust. I looked for all the suns on the outposts. For this one with bayonets, I will not. For your short memory, I renounce. Dorogomilova, Rogozhskaya, the rest, widely you have made your liturgy known. And the rank and file, side by side, on the main square, in rag shreds, consoled with laurels, sweep together, blizzard, sawdust, your pure snow. Bow heads to the graves of the rebellious. Also, the righteous were not some foreign value. These falsehoods read wounds to the righteous. The old, the former to the dump. Now, hello. And in the blood on the recent dead, dance and caviar. It is for all those brothers, I will not. Forgive me, Iberian mother. I renounce. There is an hour for those words. Through muffled sound, life taps out the highest rights. Maybe in a shoulder braced by a forehead. Maybe in a ray of light, invisible by day. In a futile trail of ashes, a wave on a sheet. Tribute to one's fear and to one's ashes. Hour of hot arbitrariness and of the quietest requests. Hour of landless brotherhoods. Hour of world orphans. This poem is called Praise to the Rich. And after this, having established first that between you and me are miles, that I count myself among the ragged, that my place in the world is honest, under the wheels of excess, at the table of freaks, cripples, hunchbacks. After this, from a bell tower, I declare I love the rich. For their root, rotten and shaky, from a cradle-raising wound, for the confused habit that they have of reaching in and out of their pockets, for how the quietest request of their lips is obeyed as though it were shouted, for the fact that they won't be let into paradise and that they don't look you in the eye, for their secrets always with the courier, for their passions with the delivery man, for the nights imposed on them, and they kiss and drink violently, and for how, in their accounts, in their boredom, in their gilding, their yawning, their cotton, they won't buy me, the insolent one. I confirm, I love the rich. And yet, in spite of being shaven and well fed and fed again, I blink and it's gone. For some reason, there's sudden bruising. For some reason, that doggy look, doubting. Might they not at the core be zeros? Might not the weights play pranks? And for the fact that among all rejections, there's no such orphanhood in the world. There's also such a bad fable about camels climbing through needles, for their gaze, amazed at death, apologetic for disease, as they are for bankruptcy. I would have lent, I would have been glad, yes, for how quietly from clamped lips I counted carrots. I was one of you. I swear, I love the rich. That poem could have been written this week. Okay. In the gray air beyond the grave, migratory flight. The gray shudder of wires turns on the rails. It's like my life was stolen along the steel mile. In the gray bleakness, two distances, bow to Moscow. It's like my life was murdered. From the last veins, in the gray bleakness, in two veins, life is running out. And God be with you. Be sheep. Go in flocks, flocks without dreams, without thoughts of your own after Hitler or Stalin. Display on your sprawled bodies star or swastika hooks. And this is the last poem I'll read from this section. To the poet, the century hasn't given a thought, and I don't care for the century. God bless it with thunder. God bless it with noise. The time is not my own. If the century doesn't care for the ancestors, I don't care for its great-grandchildren, the herd. My century, my poison. My century, my harm. My century, my enemy. My century, hell. Thank you all so much for the little hearts and emojis. It's very heartening. Um, so the last section of the book that I will read, from which I will read a group of poems, is Tsvetaeva's sequence Poems to Czechoslovakia, which she wrote about the Munich Agreement of September 1938 and Hitler's invasion of Czechoslovakia in 1939. As I mentioned, Tsvetaeva had lived in Czechoslovakia. Her son was born there. And there's a sense of identification in a way, I think, with the country marked by countrylessness, for such a long time. She wrote these poems, though, in Paris in a context of almost complete isolation at this point in her life, both from the Soviet Union, of course, and from the immigrant community in Paris. So I will end with a group of poems from this sequence. There on the map, the place. You look, blood in the face. Every village thrashing in the agony of the cross. Divided by a pole axe, a boundary pole. There on the body of the world, ulcer. It will eat everything. From the porch to the stately mountains, to the eagle's nest, in thousands of square irretrievable miles, ulcer. Laid to rest the Czech, buried alive. In the heart of the people, this wound, what was ours, has died. Only from this land called brotherly, rain from these eyes. Fat, celebrating swindler, you nicely managed this. Fat Judas, give yourself honors. We in whom the heart exists, there's a place on the map that's blank, our honor. This poem is called Took, and it begins with a quote from the 1939 newspapers. The Czechs came up to the Germans and spat. They took quickly and took hugely, took the mountain and took the subsoil, took the coal and took the steel, and what lead we had and crystal. They took the sugar and took the clover, took the west and took the north, took the beehive and the haystack, took the south from us and the east. Karlovy Vary they took, and the Tatras they took. They took close by and took distances, but more painful than our paradise on earth. They took our struggle for our homeland. They took the bullet and took the gun, took ore and took friendship. But as long as there's spit in our mouths, the whole country is armed. Forest. Did you see how it was cut, felled, fallen? Behind the oak, another oak, just killed, risen. It doesn't die, the forest. Just as dead wood is green a moment later, moss, that green coat. He doesn't die, the Czech. Oh, tears in my eyes, crying with anger and love. Oh, Czechoslovakia in tears, Spain in blood. Oh, Black Mountain, the whole world eclipsed. It's time, it's time, it's time to return to the Creator his ticket. I refuse to be. In a bedlam of non-humans, I refuse to live. With wolves in the squares, I refuse to howl. With sharks on the plains, I refuse to float down on a current of spines. I have no need for any holes, ears, or prophetic eyes. To your mad world, there is one answer: refusal. Not demons for the monk, not grief for the genius, not the mountain avalanche of rock, not the bank flooding, not red fire in the forest, not the hare in the thicket, not white willows in the storm, for the Führer, Furies. You will not die, people. God keeps you, whose heart gave garnet, whose breast gave granite. Prosper, people, strong as a tablet, fierce as garnet, pure as crystal. But most painful of all, oh, most memorable, more than garnet and crystal, what wounds my heart most of all, those small fields, those roads with big plum trees and big steps alongside plums and cornfields. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Margaree. That was a wonderful reading. I'm sort of entranced. I have to kind of bring myself back to speak now. Um, yeah. Wow, what a beautiful and haunting assortment of poems, and you read them so wonderfully. Um, well, if you want to say any comments or write any questions there in the chat, please do. We have some time. We can have a bit of a conversation. I see there's a lot of praise in the chat. Can you see that there, Marguerite?
I can. Thank you so much. Thank you. And thank you so much to everyone for being here and listening.
There are four wonderful endorsements for the book that we put on the jacket and in the front cover. And um, all of the endorsers said that the poems are acutely relevant today. And um, I guess I'm just curious to hear your thoughts, having spent so much time immersed in the work and having therefore unique insight into Tsvetaeva's mind and life experience. Um, how you think of the poems in this our strange and frightening moment, many decades after her life.
Mhm. Yes, they're so timely. I mean, it's frightening and powerful. Well, the poems, of course, that she wrote are very specific and particular to the times that she lived through, and many of them are actually quite referential. In terms of the historical reference, the sources that she draws on. But at the same time, they do have this quality of urgency and timeliness now in the present. Um, Yeah, I mean, I began to translate the poems in this collection in 2016 after the first election of Trump, um, partly to deal with the situation, I think, and came back to the collection and finally finished it last year. So there is a way that I think in reading the poems, it's possible to say things that for me feel difficult to say right now, but in a way, we can say them or express them through hearing her poems. That's my experience with them.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. Um, there's a question here, or I guess a comment. I'm hopeful that you'll say something about the process of translating this in this time. Sort of, this actually dovetails with what you were just saying. As you mentioned, a bit of incredible mirroring to this time. Maybe you just address that with my question as well. Um, and then a follow-up comment. Yes, there's a universality to the situation. How did you approach words? How closely did you feel you had to adhere to image or word?
Um, Thank you for the question, Janie. Well, when I began a, interacting with these poems, I did not know Russian, so I wanted to learn Russian originally to be able to read these poems, read Tsvetaeva and Mandelstam, and to engage with the poems and to know the poems as they are, because I felt that many existing translations into English have a kind of distorting lens on the translations. Um, so I would say the way in which that can be a gift is that I could not and can't take anything for granted, like think that I know what a word means. So or a line. So I did spend a lot of time trying to deeply understand each word or image. Um, through research about the context, but also research about the words and in some cases roots of the words. In answer to your question, Cheney, about how closely did I feel I needed to adhere to image or word, I do think the images are quite crucial to these poems, and crucial to the tone of the poems. So my intention was to stay as close as possible to the imagery, the language in the sense of the tone of the original, and obviously without recreating the um, formal elements of the original to create some kind of musical pattern in the English that could work as a sort of corollary to the Russian.
And that sort of connects nicely with another question here. Um, Cecile asks, could you speak to the challenges of translating Russian into English?
Um, well, I can speak to the challenges of Russian. My Russian teachers know. Um, I think Tsvetaeva is a particular Tsvetaeva is Tsvetaeva, I think. So I see it less necessarily as translating Russian, but translating this language of Tsvetaeva, that is Tsvetaeva's language, that is very dense and very compressed often. So that presents a lot of challenges because very often there are these layers of meaning in the at the level of the music and the language, but the poems are so tightly constructed and so densely constructed that it also doesn't work to provide a translation that explains them or sort of explicates that. So I think that there are challenges of Tsvetaeva that are unique to her poetry, I would say.
And it's not just um, the words either that are unique, right? She does some interesting things with punctuation. Like if any of you in the audience have the book, um, she sort of does an Emily Dickinson kind of thing with the dash, right?
Mhm. Yes, the dash lines that are, maybe I can show a page, um, that are part of her poetic voice, I think. So the way the pages, I don't know if I can show an example here. And Cheney mentioned exclamation marks. Yes, that too. Both part of her voice, I think more than just rhythmically in the poems, there's a sense of tone, um, ferocity, maybe sometimes in how these are working. Yes, that's true that these aspects of punctuation are also central to her, the density of the language in her poetic voice.
Eleanor asks, could you say a little more about why it's easier to express feelings about what's happening now through these poems at their historical linguistic difference?
Eleanor, that seems like a question that you should answer with your work, but I could try to answer on my part. Um, yeah, it's a good question. I don't know. I just think with what we're living through right now, for me, it's very difficult to say something right now, and including seeing what has happened in Ukraine, in Gaza, and what is happening now in the United States. It's very difficult to um, for me to speak about it. I think so. These poems create a kind of voice or shape for that. Um, and I felt that as I was reading one of the poems from Poems to Czechoslovakia, I thought that I was going to start crying as I read the poem, because I felt so much of um, the present betrayal and threat that people are living with right now.
Stephanie asks, what's next? Will you keep going translating from Russian? Your own next volume of poetry? The people want to know.
Um, yes, I'm translating. Well, at the present moment, I'm very excited and happy. I'm in, just recently started a MA program in Slavic Studies at the University of Arizona. So right now I'm primarily doing my coursework that I need to do. Um, but I have been working on a collection of Mandelstam translations of his later poetry and want to continue to work on that. Hopefully a collection encompassing all of his later poetry, the Voronezh notebooks and the Moscow notebooks, which have sometimes been broken apart, but I think can be seen together. And I'm also working on finishing another collection of my own poems.
Wonderful. Well, you certainly have my blessing for um, wishes, best wishes for that work.
Thank you.
Are there other questions or comments you'd like to share before we say goodnight? Well, it's certainly been a pleasure for me, Marguerite, to hear these poems in the air, poems that I've lived with for a while now and become familiar with. I want to thank you, and thanks to everyone for being here tonight. And be well, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you so much.
Good night.